Couscous. Okay.
Couscous is
So it's
pasta.
in the middle.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for tempting me very much, my Ashkenazi self, with your Sephardi delights on Pesach. Maybe when Mashiach comes, we'll probably find out that Sephardim are the Emets, or at least Teimanim more likely than anyone else. In terms of pronunciation, they have probably the most authentic. What's it called? Havara, whatever that is, pronunciation. But today, well, actually, yeah, we are kind of talking about that today. So today we are beginning a new mini series on the whole set of concepts which relate to, we call it here world history. So Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba, the afterlife, Mashiach, and all these issues which will hopefully help us get a grasp of where we're going. So we've talked there's a bigger picture. Some people have been, I think, Shu, you were at the first year? Yeah, Shui's been. I think you were at the first year. Tuesday night, we talked a bit about who am I and the discussion of understanding ourselves. We talked about what are we here for, about different purposes. Who are we? We talked a bit about the Jewish people and humanity and how we relate to each other. And this is the latest series. So with that, I want to start by asking you a few questions, which are essentially, let's start like this. Where do we go when we die? You can answer this based on what you know or what you believe, but also I want people to bring out, like, what do people in the world think when about this issue? If you went on the streets, maybe Emek Rephaim, but maybe something a bit more, even more diverse, what kinds of answers are you hearing to this question? Where do you go when you die? We start us off? Yeah.
Well, first of all, we don't really know for sure.
Right.
And that's the thing I think people should be honest about. Like, there's even in the Jewish world, there's sources that argue about what happens.
Right.
If you talk about technically, scientifically, physically speaking, the body goes in the ground.
Right. Yeah, which is a good.
And then as far as, like, if the person has conscience, soul that extends, if it's the people remember what they did or said and they lived on that way, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
But scientifically, in the ground, bugs in the ground, turn the grass, and that's it.
Yeah, so a scientific answer, not necessarily, meaning from the
biologically, maybe.
Yeah, it's a good, I like that. That's good. Yeah, biological answer to that question, and then a few other things, which is even within our tradition, maybe there's different opinions going around, maybe there's complexity. What do you think, Brian? Or what would you like to add to that?
For some reason, the thought that just came was, like, when thinking about, you guys are talking about like almost a Jewish burial. I've been watching things lately with different Nazi criminals that we took care of, and they did the cremation.
Right.
And put it and threw it, like, outside of Israel international waters. So that is something that outside of Judaism, a lot of people are into, especially when finances are difficult or something like that.
Yeah, well, it is a little bit uncomfortable. Uncomfortable topic, but it is cheaper. Hey, welcome. There's food here if you like, food and drinks. But yeah, it's a bit of an uncomfortable topic. But this came up recently. I was dealing with a case in Scotland where there was a woman who was Jewish and sort of connected, also very disconnected, and even when she was connected, she was quite disconnected. But it was a whole thing that she put in her will to have a cremation, but it came out that the only reason she asked to have a cremation was because it was cheaper. She just didn't, like, there wasn't that, she didn't really want one thing over the other, and then so there was a whole thing. Could we find some money to so that was a whole journey. Baruch Hashem, it sort of worked
Like,
out.
if it wasn't a mitzvah, if it wasn't, like, Jewish, like, big part of Jewish tradition, it's such a simple, like, cheap, like, lamalo,
All right. Yeah. So that's also part of, where after mentioning the grounds, not everyone is necessarily even going there. What else? What other answers are people having to this question? Or I think what's right? Don't know. What's a good answer?
By the way, it's also the Ted Williams thing. Ted Williams was a very famous baseball player in the 20th century.
Right.
He didn't really have a religion, and he asked his body to be frozen. He said, one day, what if the scientists come up with a cure for death?
I think it's present.
Yeah, he's not the only
Yeah.
one. There's a few
Yeah.
people. They're like, if the science,
What's his name?
Ted Williams, who's a baseball player, his son also. So they're like, what if the scientists come up with a cure for death one day, and then come back and unfreeze it?
Right. Yeah.
It
So,
might
okay.
sound
So
nuts.
that's a lot about.
I would want to be a mummy, very like an Egyptian.
They
Yeah.
had to.
Well, that's also.
At least you can preserve my whole.
Well, I was going to say also what the Egyptian culture brings in is they send you down with a bunch of stuff, like you have a whole house there. So what's that? You talked about consciousness. Is there some kind
Yeah.
of consciousness thing? What about like more in the positive or negative, more like spiritual aspects of like not just okay, where's the body going, but like. I mean, I'll just say one thing, obviously, is a lot of people say, where are you going after? There's nowhere. Brazil. Like, that's obviously what a lot of people are
Already touched on a
thinking.
good one, the debate between, what is it, Rambam and Nachmanides?
So
On
we'll talk a bit about that.
Like a machloket with the afterlife. I forget exactly.
Yeah, so we'll talk a bit about that
Were
tonight.
those the two that?
Well, that's those two. There's
Yeah, so everyone weighs in on this on
a
this
lot of
issue.
different things.
So we're going to embark a little bit on this journey. So that's a big question which people are dealing with. Some people are not dealing with it, and then all of a sudden, at a certain stage of life, they maybe for sad reasons are dealing with this question because of loved ones or because that they themselves are thinking about what's going to be in their next stages, and this stuff is a question which probably will arise for everyone at some point. And then we also want to, so that's after. But then one of the things that we want to think about and contemplate is how significant is that question. All questions are significant, because it's all information, it's all good stuff. But when this is kind of a very central religious question, a lot of what people are kind of doing is maybe a little bit downplaying life to think about what's next. So let's think about that. Do we agree with that? Do we not agree with that? So let's think about that. Okay, so take a look at these. You want to take one and pass around?
Could be because there's warnings, right? Like there's rabbis that have given warnings as to not look into these types of subjects too much as to focus here, that it could cause like
They don't know. They don't know. They don't want to deal with that.
Well,
heartaches
Not
that
because it's
can
true.
cause somebody to become like sick or whatever. Is that a fit? Like that's something I remember learning a long time ago of that there's warnings. This could be a reason why, like for instance, in Jewish day schools, not until you get to Nachalot do they even teach certain subjects that involve this kind of stuff.
Definitely has nothing to do with Judaism. It's all a culture, fear, misunderstanding, misrepresenting.
So let's see. Good question. Let's have a look at some of our sources. So we begin it over here in terms of the idea of life and afterlife, and I think there's a certain default position, which is what I think I might be incorrect, but I kind of think most people think. We'll draw it from the Rambam. We're not necessarily pinning it on the Rambam as opposed to others. We may not even be pinning it on the Rambam himself because there's a little bit of debate about what he meant. But let's look at a piece from the Rambam with a certain simple presentation and go from there. So it says, so we obviously have a lot of statements from Chazal about this. We have very few statements from Tanakh about this. Obviously, many allusions and hints here and there, but very few explicit sources. There are more explicit things in Chazal, but even those are a little cryptic. So everyone who weighs in on this debate is kind of grappling with these things from Chazal and what do they mean? They're literal, they're metaphorical, they're physical, they're spiritual. What's going on? So let's have a look at this piece of Rambam over here. It says, Ha'olam, this is what the early sages said. Ha'olam haba ein bo lo achila v'lo shtia v'lo tashmish. In Olam Haba, the coming world, so there's no eating, there's no drinking, there's no intimacy. Ella, so what's going on in that case? What's going on in Olam Haba? Ella, tzadikim yoshvim. Tzadikim are sitting, chilling. Vatrotem barosheim, they have crowns on their heads. Venenim miziv ashchina, and they are enjoying, they're benefiting from the rays of the Shekhinah. They're basking in the radiance of the presence of God. So that is actually a direct quote. Everything we've read so far is a direct quote from Chazal. So what does the Rambam interpret from that? He says, "Harein nitzbarer lecha she'ein sham guf." So what you see from that is that there's no body. So the Rambam is kind of reading a certain. It's kind of like a deduction that the Rambam's doing from that line. He says, well, if there's no eating and there's no drinking, so eating and drinking are things that a body needs. So if there's no eating and drinking, so there's no body. And so this is what the Rambam says. And he said, and he goes on to interpret the whole statement in a metaphorical way. Crowns really means wisdom, and he has a whole treatment of the whole thing. But I think this is the default position. When I say default, maybe I'm just projecting, but this is what I always thought, which is that when you're alive, you're alive. You've got a body and a soul, and that's the reality. When you pass away, so then it's only a soul, and the body goes wherever it goes, and the soul lives on eternally, and that is Olam Haba, and that is and then everyone, as it were. So people attack the Rambam. People attack the Rambam because he did make it sound a little bit like he might not believe in Tchiyat HaMetim. He has to believe in Tchiyat HaMetim because Chazal say you have to believe in Tchiyat HaMetim, but he may have interpreted Tchiyat HaMetim as the afterlife, that there is life after death. He himself came back and said, no, I also believe in the actual physical Tchiyat HaMetim, but I just believe that's a short-term thing.
So what is life when it's like it's life without eating and drinking? Or it's going to be like a regular life?
Meaning after Tchiyat HaMetim?
Yeah.
So he says, no, those are two separate things. So the Rambam says one. So let's again, there are. It's not 100% clear exactly what the Rambam meant. So we're just using this as a jumping off point. So based on this simple understanding, but again, please, when we do have Tchiyat HaMetim, Rambam comes back, please don't slap me for giving an incorrect. But this is what everyone thinks the Rambam thinks: is that there's something called life, something called which is Olam Hazeh. There's like this place. There's like a place called Olam Hazeh. There's Olam Haba, which is a different place, meaning it's a non-physical place. It's where the soul goes, after you die. And obviously it's the Gehenna stuff, but we can get into that. And then there is such a thing as Tchiyat HaMetim, the revival of the dead, but that's a very short-lived thing. It happens, and then everyone dies again. That's what the Rambam holds. So there is such a thing, but really, like the eternal life is only spiritual. And I think that I'm calling that the default. I think that's what when people think about the afterlife, I think that's what most
Not
people.
everybody agrees.
Well, so that's going to be the whole series. Is what does everyone else think? But I think that is what most people in the world think about when they think about the afterlife. They think the soul continues. And I think that's that. We'll see the contrast to that as we go. But I think that so that is I think a starting point. Now, one of the things, I mean, let's just point out one of the things which is a little bit you could call it unsatisfying about such a thing. One, again, this doesn't mean it's not true yet, but something which is a little unsatisfying about it is that the idea of kind of like reward and punishment is quite separate from the stuff that we're doing here. So you do something here and now, and then you get reward or punishment or both in a different place, in a different time. And it's just kind of like, it feels like you're doing something here, you're like playing the game now, and then later you like cash in on what you do. So just something that's slightly, maybe a little unsatisfying about it. It's not kasha yet. You can't say that's a reason to reject the view, but it's just like it's like a little bit disjointed between what it is that we're actually doing, that we're getting reward for, and the actual reward itself. It's like sort of different things. It's a bit like a job. You work, you do one thing, and then you get money, which is a different thing later. So it's a little bit like that. So anyway, that's I think a starting point. So as obviously a bunch of people have been saying, this is not the only opinion out there. It appears to not be the on the balance of sources that we have nowadays is actually not the majority, it's the minority of what's out there now. And as I was mentioning before, since we find such strong sources saying some other things, there's questions as to whether the Rambam really meant that, but that's the simple presentation of the Rambam. So let's have a little look at the Ramchal. You're bringing the Ramban. I believe the Ramban is on board with this other side as well. But the Ramchal is the best at talking about like this particular topic. We're gonna see a lot of Ramchal over the next few weeks.
He really hit a home run.
He's just amazing at talking about things like this. As we mentioned, the under 40 club. So
Yeah.
that was him. I mean, you were talking about the Kabbalah at 40 and stuff. So the Ramchal knew everything at a young age, and he had a very helpful way of talking about it. So let's have a bit of a look at what the Ramchal has to say about the big general map of world history, as it were. It says, Haruno she'ha'olam mitkayim shita alfei shanim. So it's a completely different starting point. That this world, the world exists for 6,000 years. Va'achar kach elef shvi hu charuf, and then there's a seventh. What's it called? Millennium. Millennium is 1,000 years. The seventh millennium. Yeah, right. 6 millennia. And then the seventh millennium, 1,000 years, is charuf, is destruction. Va'achar kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu mechadesh olamo. And afterwards, God is going to renew his world. So we're going to elaborate on what these are, but I just I'm quite a visual learner, so I kind of can't really grasp these things without writing them a little bit. So I'm going to just do a bit of writing. If it helps you, it doesn't. But it seems to be, I'll do it in the Hebrew way. So there's a year 0, of course, which is Adam Arishon. And then there's 6,000 years of, let's just do it. There's 6,000 years of what's called Olam Hazeh. 6,000 years of that. There's 1,000 years. Well, I guess, right?
Not to scale.
Yeah, exactly. 1,000 years of what's called Charut, of something called destruction. And then after that, there's a Chidush Olam. So that's what's going to be called Olam Haba. So it's also like, as we'll see a bit more about that. So, but we don't have necessarily a timeline on that. That's just from year up to 6,000, from 7,000, year 7,000 onwards. So it's going to be called Olam Haba. So you see what we've done here already. We're going to elaborate on what it is. But what we've done here is, instead of Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba being different places, as it were, it's actually going to be the same place at different times. So let's elaborate. It says, Shita alfei shanin ha'olam omed kamo shehu ata. So for the 6,000 years, that's the world as is. That's the place that we're going to be most familiar with out of all this. We live in it. This is what we call Olam Hazeh. Elef Shvi Adain lo nitchadesh ha'olam. For that seventh millennium, so the world hasn't yet been renewed fully. V'hatzadikim heim kamo shechayu b'tchiyat hametim. And the tzaddikim, they are the righteous ones. They are like they were living like they were in Tchiyat HaMeitim. We need to put Tchiyat HaMeitim and Yom HaMashiach on this map. Just remind me. But obviously that must have happened already. So the tzaddikim are going to have an interesting thing. It's just Ela she'Hakadosh Baruch Hu osei lahem kanafayim. He's going to make wings for them, and it's saying the Gemara talks about this. He's going to make wings for them. They're going to be flying around in that 7,000 years. So that's an interesting time for the tzaddikim. And the chidush ha'olam, she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu yechadesh ha'olam chidush gamor. He's going to do a complete kind of renewal. What's it called? Renovation project on the world. So that's that. Now, the chidush ha'olam, a little bit more elaboration on what's going to be after that. So chidush ha'olam v'hala. So from that renewal of the world onwards, so it's what we're going to call Olam Haba. He says, Shehu lemachar lekabel scharam. That's also a quote. Is that the Chazal say that Hayom la'asotam, today is to do them, the mitzvot, the work. Lemachar lekabel scharam is tomorrow is the time to receive the reward. So what they're kind of saying there is that there's two different time periods. There's a time period of avoda, of doing the work, putting the work in, and then there's a time period after that, which is the reward, the time that you actually receive the reward for all the things that you've done. So he says that's referring to that period there, that kind of 7,000 onwards, Olam Haba periods. That's the time when you're receiving the reward. So he says, Hinei, ein tzarich od l'shlitat haguf klal. We don't need the shlita, the rulership of the body at all, which is like we have now. Like our body has a certain shlita. Our body has a certain, quite say to the level of control, but has a certain pull. Has a certain pull over us, and the body is giving you a lot of is very much a participant in the conversation of what you're going to do at any moment. Is what does your body say, not just what does your soul say, or what your body says has a lot to do with your state now. But so at that time, that's not going to be the case. Your body's not going to be making a noise in that sense. The only reason you needed this whole idea of the body having some level of control, some level of sway, was because of the work that we're meant to do here. We have a job here, and it's actually important, as it were, to have that body like weighing us down, as it were, in order to do the work that we do, which is very interesting. And so Aval,
So then it was supposed to be.
yeah,
Then you have to work with them. You have to work with the goof, not the goof should be the opposite.
yeah.
It's kind of a
Well, just elaborate on that. Elaborate on that for a second. I just want to understand what you're saying.
to balance out the goof and the neshama. So you work with the goof, but the goof is here to help you, but in fact, it's not always the case.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Comes in the picture. But,
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it's a complicated partnership, this body and soul partnership, because they're meant to help each other, but they're often pulling in opposite directions. And that you can think about that as a paradigm for lots of other kinds of partnership in the world, which there's a dream of the partnership and there's a reality of the partnership which doesn't always match that. It says aval, so what's going to be at that time? Metziuto tafel l'neshama. The body, you were saying, the body's going to be there. It's just not going to be kind of causing you all this trouble. It's going to be tafel to the neshama. It's going to be secondary to the soul. So at that time, you are going to have that kind of that healthy partnership between the two of them. It's going to be there, but it's going to be the soul which is really dominant. Dominant, that's a good word. To enjoy the higher goods for eternity. So what did we basically just learn over here? So we have essentially these periods over here. So we have Olam Hazeh, which is what is called the time of Avodah. This is the time of Avodah. This is the time of the work that we're meant to do. So that's one thing. Then you have this interesting. Let's actually put this on a map right now. So we didn't put it on. But Chazal say that this 6,000-year period is actually split up into 3 periods. Do you know what they label those?
What, we talked about this before.
Yeah. 2,000 years of
It's like nothing.
tohu, which is like void. Then 2,000 years of
Monotheism.
correct. Yeah, so they call it 2,000 years of Torah, which is like Avraham started around there, so it's like monotheism and all that. And then the last 2,000 years are the 2,000 years of Mashiach. So what that means is basically from any time from here. So we could have the Yemot Mashiach beginning. So what does that mean for us? So we obviously haven't quite reached that yet, but it's a potential. This is something which could begin anytime from then and must happen before this date. So obviously I don't know. Thankfully, I don't draw things to scale anyway. I obviously don't know exactly when Mashiach is going to come, but around some time before we hit year 6,000, sometime there's going to be what's called Yomot HaMashiach, the Messianic era. There's going to be Tchiat HaMeitim in this system, which is
another 300 years.
Less.
So we're almost right. So we're
5, 7, 8,
6.
So it's
Right.
less than 214.
Meaning at latest.
Yeah.
At the absolute latest.
That would be
and there's also lots of things which need to happen. Tchiat HaMeitim, Yom HaDin HaGadol, so all kinds of things which do that.
After that's what I understand.
Say that again?
That Tchiat will be the last after Olam Haba.
That's also true. So we'll come to that. But there's going to be a first Tchiat HaMeitim, which is
It could
going
be
to happen.
like 200 years. That's for let's say over here.
Oh, yeah, some say by
We'll see.
Years from the beginning.
But he's saying the ultimate team is before the world's destroyed?
Yeah, it's interesting. So as he only alludes to it there, it's explicit elsewhere. So he's saying that basically what happened. Again, we're gonna take a shiur to talk more about Olam Hazeh in detail. We're gonna talk about Olam like Yomot HaMashiach, Olam Haba in detail. We're going to take one to talk about what we call the afterlife, the Olam Neshamot, which is a different thing to all of this in detail. But it just is a general broad view of the map, of the timeline of history. So this is kind of what we'll call Yomot HaMashiach. Wow, that's terrible. Together with that, there's going to be Tchiyat HaMetim. Now, what he said was that, and let's just talk about this, and then we'll come back to a thing which people are bothered by, possibly Tchiyat HaMetim meant to be at another time, is what he said is that here, this period over here is kind of like this transition. So here, this is like a transition phase where Charuv literally means destruction. Destruction. So it doesn't sound good, so pretty. This is the macro. This is Shabbos, by the way. This is because you have the 6,000 years, which is 6 days of the week, and the 7th, which is Shabbos. So but Shabbos is, so think about it in a bit like that, in that sense, because Shabbos is a little bit desolate, but like in a nice way, meaning you're not doing your avodah anymore. You're not doing your work anymore. You're actually sitting back for a day. So what does that look like on a global scale, in a very general sense? So what he says is going to actually depend at that stage who you are. So that's going to be different for the tzaddikim versus
that's what you do.
Whoever's not the other guys. So by the way, I don't know. Sometimes when you use the word tzaddikim, you mean like the top of the top, and sometimes you mean like average and up. And so I don't know who it is. I assume it's more like the top of the top because of things that we'll say, but I'm not sure.
Tzaddik, what Menachem says, tzaddik, what Balatanya.
Exactly. It's used differently in different contexts. But you're very welcome to come in. So got lots of food for you.
But generally, say tzaddikim, you don't go into details. So
correct. So it's obviously used differently in different contexts. But this 1,000 years is a time of transition where most people are in the ground. You're welcome to come. Anyway, but most people are back in the ground. So Tchiyat HaMetim happens, something called Yom Hadin Hagadol, Yomot HaMashiach, and then most people are going to go back in the ground for this 1,000 years because most people, just the world, needs to get ready for being in a very, very different state. As what's going to be called the Chidush Gamor. The world is going to be like as they're called major renovations. It's not minor renovations; it's major. It's quite interesting. Anyone familiar with the Tama projects? Anyway, it's this interesting Israeli thing that they do where they rebuild old buildings, but they kind of like, what's that?
It's called Pinoi Binui.
Is that right? Yes. So that's
like the general world, and more particularly.
Yeah, that's interesting because there's like at least I think it's like 4 on my street, like which I would say is quite interesting. You see, like it kind of is the old building. It's not the old building, but it is a new building. So the Havdil, it's a little bit like that. So there's a rebuilding phase, which means that the world's going to go through a big transition, and also people are going to have to go through a big transition to get ready for this time. There's a very different relationship between the body and the soul. Very, very different. So there's going to have to be a lot of development happening at that time. However, the tzaddikim, though this is why it's probably talking about the top of the top, there are some people who are ready for that. There are some people who basically are.
I don't know. Nowadays,
I'm not saying nowadays. He doesn't say how many there are. He doesn't say who they are. But this is nevertheless. There's going to be someone. Happens to be that the Chazal say that the tzaddikim are mu'atin. There's not so many of them. Maybe that's what this is referring to. But they are not only not in the ground. What did the Gemara just say? That said they're being given wings. So what's the idea of them being given wings? It's because they're above the physicality. So everyone else, all of us, we need to, let me not speak for you. For me, I'm going to need a big transition time, right? So I'm going to need to kind of rethink, as it were, my relationship to physicality, because I'm very, very immersed in physicality. And Olam Haba is going to be a place which is much more subtle relationship to physicality. However, there are tzaddikim who they're not so bothered by physicality. They're actually like pretty much above that, even as they're living here. So that's the idea of wings. So it seems like they're not necessarily literal, the idea of wings. Maybe yes, I don't know. But the main idea behind the wings is that they are above the ground. They're above the physicality. So that's what's going to happen in that phase. And then after that, you have what's called Olam Haba, which is the place and the time for Schar, which is the place and the time for the reward. So this is the big.
That's 7 to 8.
That is 7 onwards. I didn't put a number here,
Not to 8.
because what he said is Lenitzen Nesachim, so it's actually going to be eternal. There are stages within it, which we'll talk about when we elaborate more on that. But the general idea is that that's eternal at that stage. So it's quite interesting. So basically, we've moved very far from what I was calling the default position, which probably is what the Rambam thinks, which is that Olam Hazeh means this that you see around you. Olam Haba is a place which kind of exists right now, which people go after they die, and there's no body in Olam Haba, there's only a soul in Olam Haba. What did the Ramchal just say? The Ramchal just says it's all happening here. So Olam Hazeh is here, that they agree on. Olam Haba also here. It's just that there's going to be a, what's that? The mind, yeah. I hear, yeah. And there's going to be a whole journey of a transition from one to the other. And what that also allows is, just as there's going to be a world, it's going to be a new world, but it, as I'm calling renovation, it's going to be a development of the same world with, albeit physicality, although a much more subtle relationship to physicality. So too, what he's saying is also people. People are not going to be only souls. We're going to be very, very spiritual. We're going to be completely dominated by spirit. The dominant influence in us is going to be the spirituality. There's going to be a body, but the body's going to be a little subservient, you could say, or it's going to play along. Well, it's going to be what you call tafel to the soul, and yet with that, basically, you still have a very subtle kind of spirituality and physicality for what you just said, eternity. That's very interesting. But and I like that, and I like the bit about the tzaddikim with the flying around. I like that too. So that is the overall general map of what we are seeing over here. Any comments or questions at this stage that people want to bring up?
I'll throw some out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so in Yisker, there's a phrase for the next world. They don't call it Olam Haba, so they'll say Gan Eden.
Yeah.
It's in Yisker, right? So what's interesting is, if a person's in Gan Eden, and we don't know exactly what's going on there, they get a knock at the door or whatever, hey, you gotta get ready for Tichat Beitim, what would be a logical response from that?
That's a great question. Can I ask what you think?
Well, they would say, why would I want to go be part of that? I'm in the Garden of Paradise. I'm good.
Well, okay, let me say two things. So number one, let's talk about, we didn't actually, just to clarify, I didn't realize explicitly, but there's obviously going to be another Tchiyat Metim over here, because then that's going to be
It's two stations.
body and soul together. Yeah, body and soul together forever. So not everyone's going to need this, because the Tzaddikim were fine. They had Tchiyat Metim, everyone had Tchiyat Metim over here. Most people went back in the ground. The tzaddikim were fine. They didn't need that new stage of development. They were flying around for 1,000 years. And then the rest of us, or the rest of the masses, are going to get Tchiyat Metim, which is going to be over here. So people were bothered by that point. So just to clarify that point. It might depend which one.
Okay.
It'll depend on which one. So let's talk about, for example, this first one over here. So actually, we are all going to be very scared. Why are we going to be very scared? I'll tell you, because Shmuel HaNavi, who was the most unbelievable person, he was like the Moshe of his generation. There is a really interesting incident in Tanakh where Shaul gets a necromancer to conjure him back from the dead. He's dead, and Shaul wants to know information and what he should do, and so he brings him up from the dead. There's the debate, obviously in the Goanim, as you could imagine, does this kind of magic work? It doesn't work. But just tell you what the Tanakh says. But it says that, and it says that he, with a bit of a parish from Chazal, that he brought with him Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Gemara says, why did he do that? It says basically he's petrified of din. Of this thing of Yom Adin Gadol, which is going to be at that first time. There's going to be a certain kind of judgment, and he was scared. So he brought Moshe with him to vouch for him and say everything that this person wrote, i.e. Moshe, this person did, i.e. Shmuel. Right? If that's how Shmuel feels, he was pretty good. He was a pretty good guy.
Humble.
That's also true. He was probably more self-aware as such than we were. But as a general sense, so this Tchiyat Metim is going to be a little scary, because it's going to come with a few It's going to come with this idea of din and a few scary things. However, this one you're wondering about. I'm chilling and I'm enjoying myself up here. But the truth is, what's going to be happening at that time is, which we'll probably get a bit of a chance to elaborate on, is obviously, as you're mentioning, when the body is going down here, so the soul is going somewhere up here, and so you're talking about the soul, I suppose. But the soul is not the entirety of the person, which is quite interesting. Is that we as human beings are not just a soul. We are actually what's a murkab, a complex entity, which is made up of a body and a soul, and it's part of who we are. Actually, it's not our essence. Our body isn't our essence, but it is part of who we are and it is part of our story. And in that
Because
sense,
it means that the bone of lose.
yeah.
So it does need some kind of goof in order to come back. It's not like a complete separate.
Well, but that's what Tichat Beitim you're talking
Yeah,
about. Yeah.
okay, so it means the body if the body would be complete gone, we wouldn't be able to come back at all. So only it comes back because it has something what keeps going.
That's also true. Yeah. I don't think that's a problem. I think that's also fine. But what we're saying is that actually the true and optimum reality for us to exist in is body and soul, because that's who we are.
Well, I want to throw a curveball. That's why I was setting this up, because the Ramchal says something different. He's going to say Gan Eden has not been made yet. It's after this whole process, because this is Olam Neshama.
Yeah, but it's
From
related.
Human perspective, not from God's perspective. Meaning, right now there is no Gan Eden according to the Ramchal.
It's not quite. There is actually Gan Eden. Actually, Gan
I'm
Eden.
saying what Ramchal says. I'm not saying.
No, Ramchal. Yeah.
Can you send me a source later? Because I always thought it was Olam Neshama.
I'll give you just a brief
Okay.
word on it now, and then but basically there's different parts of the soul, which we'll just a quick word. If this helps you, good. If it doesn't help, don't worry. It's a bit of terminology, but we really have three parts of our soul. We have our nefesh, and our ruach, and our neshama. These are the three main parts of the soul. They're more
Basically, besides time.
correct. That's what I'm saying. Correct.
If you're making it gotta include everything.
So the neshama actually includes everything which is above it in this system. But if you find all these primarily, these are the three primary ones that we're working with on a day-to-day basis. To some extent, we sometimes work a little with the chaya, but these are the three main ones. Sometimes you'll see four. But yeah,
when Mashiach will come, it's going to be revealed that the other two parts, but now we're far away from that.
Correct. We're talking about these are the main parts that we're dealing with, and these main part, and also neshama can also be, as I'm mentioning, a collective term for it plus the two things above it. But what actually happens when a person dies is that the nefesh stays down with the body in the kever, in the grave. So that's the whole idea of visiting kevarim. I'm not encouraging or discouraging, but there's a certain kind of consciousness which is existing there. The ruach goes to Gan Eden, which is a place which actually exists now. Happens to be that most of us don't have the spiritual lenses to be able to realize where it actually is. It's kind of like a weird sci-fi thing, because it actually exists right now. So you could, where is it? I'm not really sure. In principle, you could probably walk through it and you would never notice. It's a little bit funny, but that's where the ruach goes. And then the neshama goes to olam neshamot. So they both, all of these three things, obviously the earth, and the Gan Eden and the Olam Neshamot, they all exist now. And there are places that souls can go and are present. Now it's just that the different parts of the soul. Exactly. Yeah. So that's also related. So this is different to Gan Eden. It's different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the opinions, for example, Ramchal is the one who came up with that idea, though, right? The Olam Neshamot, or the idea was before?
It's earlier. It's just that the Ramchal is very good at
Elaborate.
very good at elaborating on it. But no, all these ideas are much earlier. I just bring him in because he's the best at talking about it. Meaning in a way that I can, like you've probably got Zoras, which are nice and which are more explicit in their way, but I don't understand what they're talking about. So let's say one more thing before we call it. So this is a very broad overview, but it's very interesting to think about. And let's talk about one particular point, which is how do we get from one to the other? Are we just passive passengers in this process, or are we actually meant to take some kind of active role? So let's have a look at this other part of the Ramchal from earlier in the Sefer. He says as follows. So this is a line that we have seen before and we will for sure see again because it's just a fantastic, important part of the Sefer. It says, "Ayisod Rishon Shalav Omed Kol Habinyan." The first foundation that everything stands on is Hu Sheratza Ratzon Elyon Shia Adam Mashlim Et Atzmo Ve'et Kol Hanivra Bishvilo. That the human being should complete himself and everything which was created for him. V'zeh Atzmo Yeh Zechuto Uscharo. And this will be his merit and reward. So already what we're seeing over here is that the idea of completing one's self, i.e., getting oneself to a higher level, completing or perfecting the world, is actually means that we are very active participants in moving things from here, essentially all the way along to there and getting the world to its perfected state. That's actually our job. He just said that's what God wanted, that we would mashlim ourselves and the Bria. That's our. So we're not only are we just sitting here in this world. It's the whole point of being here is to develop this world into something more. And he says this is going to be our merit and reward. What does he mean by that? He says chuto, it's our merit. Lefi shenimtza shehu mitasek v'yiga lehasiga shleimut hazeh. It's our merit because we are going to be the ones who are working with and putting the effort in order to reach this shleimut. Ukeshiyasigu yeh nene rak miyagia kapav v'chalko mikol amalo. That when we actually reach it, what are you going to be enjoying? What are you going to be benefiting from? Your work. This is not just a place that God is going to zap you into. It's the place that you built. You're going to be benefiting from exactly what you did. And he said, "Scharo," and then what's the reward element of this? Shahare sof sof hu yeh hamushlam. At the end of the day, what's going to be is you. You're going to be in a better place. That's the real schar, is that you're going to be a better person. You're going to be in a better place. Right, so that we'll have to talk about. So v'yeh mitaneg b'tova l'netzach, and you're going to actually enjoy this good for eternity. So basically, what's coming out in all of this is that it's our job to develop olam hazeh into olam haba. It's actually not just something, it's the thing. That is the thing that we're here to do. So it creates a whole different look on what we're doing here, on the afterlife and all this stuff, is that we're very much involved. So Italo, let me I just want to leave on one thought, and then we can have some questions and points from everyone, is there's something, I think one of the things which I really, really enjoy about this approach is that there is this kind of religious, usually religious, sometimes from other angles as well, but there is, sorry, Zoom, I just didn't know.
Judaism is not a religion.
Correct. People who are thinking about spirituality and theology and things like that, this world is kind of like b'di'evet. That's kind of like how people look at this world. Like, this world is like not ideal. I'd rather be somewhere else. I kind of, as you're alluding to I'd rather be somewhere else, but I'm here. Okay. So, and honestly, it leads to ideologies where being a martyr is like the best thing you can do. And, like,
people throw this world away, unfortunately.
Right.
Did you say Judaism is not a religion?
Wait, let's come back to that because that's a big topic. Let's come back to that.
It's
a big topic.
There's a nationality, but there's a component.
We'll come back to that. It's a whole sociological.
Take it from the Christians.
It depends. We'll come back to that. It's an issue in sociology which we can discuss. What this does is it turns the whole thing on its head. This world is the place to be. This is our project. Is this world, this world and this life. So okay, of course, there's laws that there's sometimes in very, very negative circumstances where a person would be required to give up life. But that's not what we dream about. What we dream about is life, and developing this life into the best thing that it can be, and developing this world right here into the best thing it can be. So I liked that because it kind of gives our perspective has a much more optimistic view of this life and this world and what you can do with that. Okay, tough. So let me stop the recording.
I agree with that if you mess it up the whole time. If
Yeah.
this is the reason why we're here,